a single mom of a daughter right now living in Florida, or somebody who's working at their church in Idaho and trying to think about, oh, that could never happen here. And just showing people through your illustrated experience
Yeah.
how it could happen anywhere.
Yeah, it's not
It doesn't discriminate.
their tactics. What do most groomers have in common? And then I branch out even from a child predator to other forms of predators, which could be a pathogenic parent. It could be a cult. It could be an institution. So I get pretty broad and I go beyond because, and this is where I tie it together, the tactics can be the same. Their desires are different. Their outcomes different. So
And their
sometimes it's,
targets, the age
yeah,
of the target might be different.
the age of the target might be different. It may not have anything to do with children. It might have everything to do with control of people, a group, community. So, and that goes into cults, it goes into religion, it goes into all different kinds of areas. So, however, when I'm saying stuff like that, if you want to draw it back to what it fits in your four F's, that's fine too, because that's a great way to expand someone's perspective and knowledge.
I also think that some of what we've done incorrectly with safety and prevention and protection is that we talk about these issues in such an enormous way that it becomes very difficult for people to understand. But yes, but what do I do now? What do I do
Yes.
next? What do I do
Teach
in
them
this
the red
moment?
flags. Yes.
Yes. And so you even in the effort of true crime, and I'd be curious to hear your thoughts globally about that movement and just how popular that has become in your experience as a criminologist. But even getting to a place where we start talking about crime prevention as here are the here are the manageable steps you can take today that could change the
Mhm.
outcome.
Yeah.
Because I
What to
feel like
look for. Yeah.
what to look for and then what to actually do, because many times our advice, even though it's coming from a really great genuine place, often makes people feel like, well, this is confusing and it's cloudy and it's
How
opaque.
does it apply to me?
How
Yeah.
does it apply and what can I actually do? Because
Yeah.
the fear mongering does not get us to safety.
No, I do believe and I do use a little bit of fear just to make people stop. It's a thought stopper, but not in a thought stopper in a way of control. So there's thought stopping tactics, but then there's also stop and listen kind of things where I might grab your attention by saying something dr- drastic just to get you to stop and think for a second, remove those guards and have all your alert systems on so that you're listening for sound, sight, whatever. You're anticipating what is she going to say? What is this about? So it helps to break through the barrier of, when they have that shield up to deflect anything that's fearful. In a way, you have to pierce through that shield to get them to be able to the hear and be able to recognize the red flags because they think it's someone else's problem. Like you were just saying, this doesn't happen here. We're in Idaho. We're in the safest place in the world, Utah, right? Well, if you look at statistics and almost on a weekly basis, there's another, and I'm going to use this as an example. It doesn't mean that it's all Mormons, but there's a lot of things that are being brought to the surface regarding that particular religion. Not that it's isolated to only that religion, but it's very active right now, very active right now. And you think this is safe. We should be in the safest space in the world. We should never have to deal with any of this in this location, but it's very concentrated there. So why is that? What's going on? What's causing that? So that's what I try and dig into on, other sides. But I think when we can bust through I don't know what to call it, besides the shield, the barrier that we all put up when we have certain filters, right? We'll let some things filter through, but we block everything else. So we have to be able to get through those filters. And in order to do that, sometimes we have to have a shock factor. This is good.
Fear is a tool in the toolbox, one of
It's the
many,
fear of
hopefully.
missing something, not missing out, but missing something.
Why don't we start by taking a moment for you to introduce yourself and tell us why you are here on Known and Trusted? What do you do in your day-to-day work? What compels you about spreading information and messaging about grooming and safety for children and vulnerable adults?
I'm Don McCarty. I am a criminologist and I'm a cult specialist and a cybersecurity strategist. And what I do with those things combined is I look at behaviors and tactics of things. So like in my cybersecurity world, I may look at how a bad actor is breaching a system. In my criminology world, I'm looking at that same concept on how a bad actor is breaching my humanness, my human brain, my perimeter, my human perimeter. So I turned the lens, my cybersecurity lens, onto certain behaviors. And some of these behaviors I've experienced myself in my own life. So I'll give you a little bit of personal background. When I was 4, I was abducted by my estranged mother who had remarried and they wanted to start a family. So out of the blue, 2 years after the fact, they came in. It was a pretty violent, hostile kind of abduction. It was something that I didn't really have a lot of help, mental therapy or anything like that to acclimate into this all of a sudden new world that was very tragic for me. So my trauma started very young and it never was remedied. So I ended up living in an identity crisis and not really understanding who I was because I had an installed narrative of who I was supposed to be now, regardless of who I was or I was meant to be. So I will use a lot of cybersecurity terms, and I do that in a way to help maybe unpolarize some of the mental health terminologies, some of the legal terminologies that kind of push people maybe away from understanding or wanting to understand, wanting to read more about that. But when I can use it in a way that is completely different, and we're all learning more about cybersecurity, security awareness when we're online, it's a way that really kind of helps people connect. Like, oh, I understand what a human perimeter is now. And when I talk about a perimeter of a network at a corporation, there's a little bit of a stepping stone to see the connection. So it's not such a huge topic anymore. It kind of brought it down to a level that people can understand and apply in their own world. So that's in a nutshell a little bit about what I've been doing and my why. And I want to be able to share this to keep kids safe so that they don't have to go through what I've lived through. So
Something that you would like parents watching or listening or people who work with youth to unlearn about grooming and prevention?
I think the first thing I would like everybody's vocabulary to be eliminated is it won't happen to me. It won't happen to my child. It won't happen here. All of those terms need to be eliminated because there is no discrimination. It's only about circumstances, availability, and the convenience of whatever I'm drawing a blank on that. I don't want to say situation because that's not really the right term, but opportunity arises wherever a predator is, they'll take any opportunity. And they'll also take the path of least resistance. Most bad actors will. It doesn't matter if you're a predator or a thief or a hacker, you're going to take the path of least resistance. So opportunity is something that I think they need to consider instead of saying it's not going to happen to me.
When I'm hearing you, I'm also reminded that just that shift in the possibility lies here. The possibility is present no matter where I live, no matter my socioeconomics, no matter my level of education, no matter my
Hmm.
familiarity with the subject. That shifts the way that you approach whether online safety, cybersecurity, and day to day safety and
Exactly.
security.
Yes. Yeah. And something else to think about too is whenever you're online, predators are also online and they're online all the time, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So you're only one click away from any potential interaction with a predator. Does it mean that something's going to happen? No. You may have already interacted with child predators. You would not have no way of knowing who you're interacting with online because you don't have the presence, like you were saying, and I'm going to use it in a way that you can't see someone eye to eye, face to face. You can't get a vibe when you walk in a room. You're looking at a monitor screen, and if you've never met in person before, your body does not engage the instincts that are required when you're in a face to face situation. So there's a completely different element to being online. But when I talk to parents, I tell them that their children are only one click away. So if you're only one click away and your children are only one click away, who's more likely to use discernment, caution? Who's more likely to use some critical thinking? That's going to be the adult. Guess what children don't learn until they're around 25 years old? All of that. And if we're not teaching them, like people say, oh, they won't learn this until they're 25. That's not necessarily true. Children will learn what you teach them. So if you're teaching them how to think critically, they can do it. They're just not going to grow into that automated ability to be able to think critically on their own. We have to teach them. We teach them love after they're born. We teach them empathy. We teach them all kinds of things, how to walk, eat, all those things that are not part of the autonomous system, where they're things that they're learning from us. They're watching us. And if we're not teaching them how to use critical thought and how to assess what's dangerous about this situation, it's okay to teach your children how to assess a dangerous situation without terrifying them. So there's a very fine line I walk here, is because we have to almost approach terrifying to promote safety. And we don't want to tip over the edge of terrifying, because we don't want to create nightmares and being afraid of people and not wanting to engage socially, right? There's a very fine balance that we have to take, but we also have to make sure that when a child sees somebody sitting in the corner with their, eyes kind of rolling around and looking off to the side, they can pick up those little flags. These are little flags that we need people to be able to identify, and kids need to be able to see that and understand body language. What does this mean when someone, right, he acted that way? Because how many times have you heard a kid say, "Oh, they're just weird"? What's weird? What is weird? What does that mean to the kid? Are they weird because they just, maybe they didn't dress cool? Or is it weird because they did something and their instincts kicked in? Help them understand what that instinct is. That felt weird because that guy is kind of exhibiting some red flags, or that girl. It doesn't matter. There's both. There's no gender. I don't want to say gender bias. There's no exclusion on gender. It doesn't matter which gender someone is. They could still be a bad actor. So you have to be able to and show them how to say, okay, wait a minute. That's not just weird because they dressed funny. That's weird because that guy said something to me, or that guy wanted to touch my shoulder. That's a red flag. And we just have to teach them the difference between what is appropriate versus what should never happen. And as we teach them the red flags, then the more they're going to be able to protect themselves when you can't be there to protect them.
So, what would you say are the top 5 red flags that you always teach families that you work with and communities that you find surprising that you have to teach? Does that make sense?
Yeah, flattery. Flattery is, I wish we could tell people flattery is not necessarily a good thing, because flattery is a tool that a bad actor will use. And I think that's one of the F's that you talked about earlier, is flattery is the first thing they'll go for. They'll say, "Oh, aren't you beautiful?" And they send a friend request. Guess what? Everybody wants to hear that. They want to hear that they're beautiful, or what they said was fantastic, or is there something that relates to them, especially if they call you by name. People love to hear their name. So when someone's just automatically in your inbox flattering you, you should be asking, well, why? And then all of a sudden, maybe they're saying things that shouldn't be said to someone that you have never met in person. You've only met online. How could they possibly have feelings? Let's say, well, let's go this route. So if someone starts talking about my love, my dear, nobody should say those kinds of things. Those are red flags, because unless you've known someone for a while, if they said that to you in person, you would probably be a little irritated that they said that to you. So why are we accepting it online? Why is it okay then? Another thing is accepting authority or the assumption of authority. Because just because someone online who thinks they're smart, acts like they're smart, and behaves in a way that makes you believe that they're an authority, but in a way that's contradicting or belittling or bullying, those are not authority figures. that's a sign of it could go into violent communication. It could be a sign of a behavioral pattern that you need to be tracking and keeping an eye on. But we're not teaching kids this. So how do we expect kids to interact with adults? Because, and this is something I say quite often, you don't let your kids go to the park by themselves anymore. When I was a kid, I could be on my bike riding 2, 4, 10 miles away. My mom wouldn't even know where I was. We're drinking out of hoses. We're playing in dirt. We're doing things that you just don't hear of today. So a park could be 3 blocks down the road, and a parent will walk or drive their kids there, sit there with them, and walk and drive them home. And there's occasions where if there's a neighborhood and the neighborhood has surrounding parents, other parents are at the park, that might be a time when a child could maybe venture down to the park by themselves. But there's usually a community-based security alarm system basically installed in that area. So if you're not okay with letting your kids walk to a park to play by themselves, let's say nobody's there, would you let your kid play in a park that's 3, 4, 5 blocks away? You can't see them, you can't hear them, you don't know who's around the park. Would you allow them to stay at that park all day long without checking in with you, without saying, hey, there's a strange guy in a van over here, what do I do? There's no communication. So think of the internet. And I'll explain the internet as this is a dive bar. Would you let your kid walk into a dive bar and you drive off and they're hanging around with who knows what sorts of people are hanging around in this internet dive bar? Because that's what they're getting. So while they're interacting with people online who they can be anonymous. They don't have to tell who they really are. Nobody has an ID online. So the more that you're letting your kids be online unsupervised or undersupervised, because a lot of parents are very good at supervising and trying to keep their children as safe as possible. So, but I would venture to say that sometimes it's undersupervised, because just because you're sitting next to your child on the couch while you're watching a movie together doesn't mean they're being supervised. You're in the same room with them, but they're also in another room called a chat room on their phone with somebody who says they're 13 years old and they're grooming your child. You're sitting right next to them on the couch. Do you know what's going on that phone? So these are certain things that I think is important for parents and caregivers, anybody really that are involved with children, to understand the level that we have to rise up to protect kids today. They can't do it themselves. They rely on us to do it. And a lot of parents are pre-computers in the home. They were born before computers even were in the home. My children didn't have a computer in the home until they were, school age. And then I didn't even let them use it. I used it, but I didn't let them use it. And growing up with a mom that's in criminal justice and, cybersecurity, my kids did not have social media growing up. They didn't have MySpace, they didn't have Facebook, they didn't have any opportunity to be online. They did have their own computer systems, and they were involved with things like Xbox gaming and just being in emails and some chat rooms on the internet, but they didn't have social media accounts. They still had trouble even then, because you still have chats in games, and there's a lot of ways of gaming can be a really dangerous place where parents are not involved in gaming at all whatsoever. So there's just so many areas that we have to catch parents up with so that they have a chance to protect their children. Now, that doesn't mean they have to learn cybersecurity. It doesn't mean that they have to understand the criminal justice side of things. They don't have to learn how to play a game. What they need to learn is how to talk to their children about safety without pushing the kid. So it's a balance of family communication, and that you're not trying to create rules to make them feel punished. You're trying to create a family safety unit so that everybody is watching out for everybody in the family, so the child doesn't feel picked on. They need to feel like, okay, we're a family and everybody in the family has to follow these rules, including the parents. So that's what I teach. Parents have to learn everything that they're expecting their kids to do, they have to follow. They have to follow those same rules.
It's that we as a family have a set of
Yeah,
standards and that we follow those sets of standards.
especially in a time where kids know more about technology than parents do. So you're already at a disadvantage. You cannot fight that battle. You cannot say because I said so anymore, because guess what? Uncle Google will help. So will Aunt Alexa. There's all different kinds of ways for kids to circumvent parental guidance with an online. And now we have AI that can mimic parental guidance. You can be replaced if you push your kids away. And I don't mean to sound that like an accusation. It's just a rite of passage in a way where children, as they grow older, they grow more distance. And you want to be able to allow that to happen in a safe, healthy way without pushing them so far away they never come to you. You want them to come to you. You want them to feel safe. So we don't punish the same way we used to, because that pushes them into going into maybe a potential predator's arms, because that person is going to do what? They're going to flatter them. They're going to love bomb them. They're going to give them everything they feel like they're missing. So it's a tricky situation for parents that they're finding themselves in. And it's not their fault at all. It is not the parent's fault that there's a technology parenting gap. And that gap is we don't have the tribal knowledge that came from one generation to the next on how to deal with this situation. The generations from millennials on all of a sudden have technology in their lives. So we can't pass any knowledge down to them. They're the new frontier. They're learning something that was never done before. And now they're having to figure it out. Parents are having to figure out how to engage with that. The best thing I think for parents to do is to collaborate on a parenting level. Instead of doing the authoritative parenting, I teach them how to have a collaborative parenting so that your family comes together and works together on safety rather than rules and laws and restrictions and grounding and taking the phones, which I don't recommend. Never take a child's phone from them. That's a different world that we're trying to minimize. If we take a phone from a child, that's their contact, that's their community, their entertainment. Everything is in that phone. And when we take that from them, there's a sense of think about a child who goes to school and they're the only ones that don't wear Nikes. Everybody else is wearing Nikes, but I'm not wearing Nikes. That can be devastating for a child. So we don't want to put them in that position. So we need to work around safety regarding the phone. Let them keep the phone, but then we have to put in some guardrails. We have to put in some security measures and some ground rules that they can follow and understand that it's not all you. It's not your fault because you ended up talking to someone in a chat room. I want to make sure you're safe. And the only way I can make sure you're safe is to help you. And we're going to do it this way. Is that okay? Do you have any suggestions? Sometimes asking the child, hey, you know about more about technology than I do. I know a little bit more about security. And if we can brainstorm this together, we can figure out a way that you can still have access to your friends while we're keeping you safe. And that's the goal.
Interview yesterday with a mom who her son met someone through school and then he got his phone number and started using his device as a tool in grooming. And one of the concepts that I write about and that we talk about is how grooming has gone hybrid. So it used to be that, you would worry about like meeting somebody in person, but now we meet somebody in person and then they are using online platforms, devices in order to communicate with kids. And then vice versa, people are meeting kids through gaming apps, whether it's
Hmm.
Roblox or Snapchat, and then they're trying to have in-person contact. I'll drive to your
Yeah.
state, I'll come pick you up. A lot of these abduction cases tragically look like sort of follow that pattern again and again, that
Yes.
what
Yeah.
starts off online wants to move to in person, and what starts off in person often wants to move or is
Yep.
facilitated via online. Is that what you see in your work? Am I off
Yeah,
kilter
something
there?
else. No, and something else that's really important there too. I want to add is sometimes it's a third person that is connecting to people. And if you think of Ghislaine Maxwell, this is exactly who she is. She's the third person. where you have the predator who desires something, and you have I don't want to say victim, you have a person
A
who,
target.
a target, yeah, target would be a good word. They're maybe they're needing something in their world. Like sometimes I needed to not feel invisible. I needed to feel like I mattered, that somebody cared enough about me to actually communicate with me as a person, that actually felt like they saw me. That is the where the third party comes in, and they match that. So now Ghislaine, as an example, she may have, and I'm not going to say that I'm not going to get into the battle of what she did or didn't do, but I just want to use it as an example where she also recruited other third parties of people that would have been my age. So now I'm interacting with someone my age. I go to school with this person, or I live across the street from this person, and now this person has a motive. Maybe they're promised something in return. They're going to go a school of their choice, or they're going to be able to, have a job or a career that they're looking forward to, whatever the promise is. It could just be that they were promised, a pair of shoes. I don't know. That part is less important than the fact that I have a peer that is now grooming me. The peer doesn't realize that they're grooming me. They're just doing a mission. So we often think of having discernment and whatnot, but when you have people in authority and you have people that are following that authority, they're going to more likely do what they're asked to do because of that authority. So when you have a situation where you got this third party, and this could be several layers deep. So you've got someone that's my age who may report to somebody that overall handles a bunch of people that are doing this. And then that person reports to the other third party. So that would be like where the Ghislaine Maxwell person would be. And then that person reports to the actual predator. So this is a pattern that we haven't even really started thinking about this yet, because who's going to question the same aged peer that I could be in danger from someone that is sleeping over at my house, or I sit at the lunch table with them at school, someone I know personally, and yet there's still potential danger for both of us, not just me if I was in that situation. So these are things, if we're not teaching children how to tell an adult no, or that there's certain things that adults should ask you and there's certain things that an adult should never ask you. If we're not teaching them what they should never be asked to do, then they're not going to know that asking me to come over with them to a friend's house is wrong. And you
Just how important it is that we get away from, well, this is a safe person, this is an unsafe person. It's really about teaching about behaviors,
situational
behavioral
awareness.
patterns, situational awareness, because it could be a peer. And this is why kids can't be left out of the conversation
Yep.
about grooming. And
Not
I've been
anymore.
beating that drum along
Yep.
with you, that we have to have a conversation about the fact that it could be an older youth, the fact that it could be someone who's goes to school where you go to school, or
Yeah.
somebody you meet online through a normal gaming
It could be
platform.
completely innocent, completely innocent. And if you think about my situation, I was 15 and my stepfather flew for a corporate company and had a Learjet that he was the chief pilot of. And anytime that the corporate leaders wanted to go on a trip, he would have me go and wash and wax the plane. And it was a King Air Learjet. So of course I'm going to earn some extra summer money, right? Why not? So I would go and I would wash this plane, and I'd have ladders around it and this great big humongous hose, and be out there just playing in the cool water in the hot California sun. Yeah, I loved it. I would recruit my friends over to come and help me. It was a fun thing to do. What we didn't notice is the guy that was befriending my stepfather, who was curious. Why are all these kids washing the plane? Why would you wax a plane? What's the point of doing that? It's just going to get dirty once you get up in the air again. And my stepfather would tell him, well, it's all about the aerodynamics. And it makes my bosses happy because it's a shiny object, and that makes them happy. So it was all about pleasing his people, his peers or his bosses. But what he didn't realize was happening is this new person who just started hanging around and assuming or being friendly and becoming more and more interested in sharing stories. And then my stepfather was very much a missionary, right? He's forever. I mean, he didn't go on a mission when he was younger. I was raised Mormon. So he was a what they call ward missionary. And it was always about converting new people, bringing new people into the religion. So when this guy came and started hanging around, that's what he's thinking. Oh, look, I'm going to convert this guy.
A new
So we have,
recruit.
yeah, what do we have going on here? This is two forms of grooming. One is grooming one for converting into a religion. The other one's grooming one because he's interested in the daughter that's cleaning and washing the plane. Neither one of them realized what was going on. However, the groomer, the real groomer, will assume any role that you need him to be so that he can get close, right? So what is happening here is he becomes whatever my stepfather wanted, which meant someone that was interested in joining the church. So he pretended that he was pretty interested. And yeah, I'll come over and hear some more about that. He was invited to dinner. He was invited to sit at the table with me sitting right next to him time after time after time. And what was different for me? Nothing. I was so used to having strangers come and sit at that table that it didn't even faze me. So months go by and this guy's still coming over, but I'm noticing things now that I didn't notice then. I didn't realize that him putting his hand on my hand was something. I didn't realize that when I was cleaning off the table and he jumps up to help and rushes over with some dishes and he puts them next to me and he's so close I can feel his breath on my hair as his hand reaches the small of my back or the top of my shoulder. I'm not realizing then what was going on. Now I look back and think all of the signs were there. We all missed them. Why? Because we were so wrapped up in the little world that we thought was really happening. That was not what was happening. We were being groomed. And I wasn't the one being groomed first. It was my parents. My parents were groomed before he ever laid a hand on me or
Yeah,
really even
because
spoke to me.
you have to. I mean, if you were to put yourself in a predator's shoes, it would never work. You have
No,
to get the buy-in of
you
the
have
people
to
who are
get
the
the guards down.
gatekeepers around these children. Did you
Hmm.
have any siblings who were also experiencing this level of
Mm-mm.
attention? Was it only
No,
you in the
it was
neighborhood?
only me.
Was this person interested in having the same kind of connection with any of the other of your peers or friends?
Not that I noticed, but I know that when he'd go to church with us, and so the ward would know that we have a potential convert. Of course, the missionaries would come over. They would teach him the lessons, and he would. I remember he would give back a little bit, where he would question, like, "What do you mean about this?" Something about the whatever the doctrine was at the time that they were teaching it. I remember him being very inquisitive, but interested. He went through all the motions, every bit of it. You would have never known that he was not really there for that. So it got to the point where now the whole ward thinks this is a safe person. I mean, they're not even thinking that he potentially couldn't be a safe person. They're thinking he's going to join this church, he's going to become a Mormon, he's going to be baptized, he's going to live the doctrine and we'll have another priesthood holder. He'll get married in the temple and he'll have, a family and pay tithing and so they have their own idea of what is going to happen, right? So we had a family home evening one time. We were talking about temple marriage, and I don't know how much are you aware of Mormons or the temple or any of that at all?
I think it's helpful to go in enough detail so that anybody who's
Okay,
listening to our conversation who's maybe unfamiliar with it. So can you give us enough of an outline so that they would understand?
sure. So the temples in the Mormon faith are the houses of God. There's ordinances that are received in the temple that it's a covenant that you're making to live a certain standard. So in order to even get to the temple, you have to have a temple recommend, which means that you are living the gospel as designed. You are following all of the rules, the articles of faith, the word of wisdom, the law of chastity. You're not allowed to have premarital sex at all. There's nothing that you can do in those areas, or you won't be able to get a temple recommend. Well, if you're old enough to have a temple recommend and you don't have one, that is not somewhere a Mormon wants to be. They want to all have a temple recommend, right? Because otherwise, people might say, what'd you do?
At what age do people normally receive their temple recommend?
It depends on the ordinance that you're doing. The 3-year-olds to 12-year-olds is called it's the primary, which is the younger. It's like the elementary portion of like a Sunday school. Then you have the teenagers, the preteens and teenagers. So they can go to the temple and do baptisms for the dead. So what that means is that people that have died, that have been dead for a certain amount of time, or there could have been a request of a family member, you can go to the temple and you can baptize as a proxy that person who is no longer on this earth. So you would say their name in the ceremony, and then when you were baptized, you were literally being baptized for that person. Doesn't matter if that person was baptized Catholic or whatever, you now just converted them to Mormonism in the afterlife. Mormons heavily believe in an afterlife, and that there's kingdoms and stuff like that beyond this world, that this world is just here for time, but then there's an eternity. So another covenant that you might enter into would be the endowment session. And that's when you're really preparing yourself for temple marriage. Usually it's done right before you may get married in a temple. I never got married in the temple, but I did receive my endowments, which is the first time that I had the thought that this is a cult. When I was in the temple receiving my endowments, it was the most uncomfortable thing that I've ever gone through. And I can tell you that story on a different call because that'll take too long. So once you turn 18, this is when you could go to the temple more frequently. You can go and you can participate in doing the same thing for the dead. So if somebody died and they've been baptized, now they need ordinances. They need their endowment, right? They need to have a sealing in the temple. Sealing in the temple is basically an eternal marriage. Here you have civil marriage. When you get married in the temple, you're married for all time and eternity. You're sealed together. And then your children are automatically sealed to you if they were born into that covenant. Or someone like me who wasn't born into a family. My parents were married after I was born, of course, after the abduction, after all of that. So we go to the temple and I'm now sealed to my mom and her husband for all time and eternity. And that's why I'm writing my book called Sealed to My Abductor, because he basically stole me from my real father. And now I'm sealed to him forever in the afterlife. So then as a kid, I'm thinking, well, what happens to my father? But I wasn't allowed to ask or talk about him. So I've had to carry that shame or guilt around that I just basically left my dad to fend for himself. And now I'm sealed to someone else so that I could be saved. There's a whole big story there that we're going to put aside now for the time being, because we'll get distracted on what we're really here talking about, which is what his name was Michael, what this groomer was doing in our home and that family home evening that we were participating in, and the point of a celestial marriage and being able to go to the temple. So he's now asking questions about what would I have to do in order to be able to get married in the temple. So first you have to be baptized. Then you have to receive the priesthood blessings, which there's 3 different levels of the priesthood that he would have to receive. And then he would be able to get married in the temple after a year. You can't just like do that all in 3 months and get married. Yeah, it's a year, and you'd have to have accomplished certain things in order to be able to receive a temple recommend, which means he'd have to be paying tithing. He'd have to really be participating in all forms of the expectations of the religion. So he's looking at a picture of the Salt Lake City temple that's right behind my parents, and he's saying, is that the temple that I would be married in? And they were explaining to him how there's temples all over the United States. Back then there were fewer and farther between, but that would be one of the temples he could choose from. He could go to the one there in California. I think the Oakland temple was there. or the Salt Lake City Temple, any other ones that were within travel distance, of course. You had to travel anyway to get to them unless you lived in those big cities. So then he looks at me and he puts his hand on my hand and he says, "You would look beautiful in a white dress getting married in the temple." I was 15, 16. I'm probably around 16 now.
And you've
And I
known
remember
him.
thinking, gross.
How long
Like,
has he, at this point, how long has he been coming into your
it's
home?
probably
I mean,
been about
he's
4 or 5 months.
months. Yeah. Everyone's
So,
comfortable with him.
they don't just automatically take the lessons and join the church. Sometimes it takes them a while to really you have to read the Book of Mormon, all these things. But when I was sealed to my parents when I was 9, I've seen the ceremony close. And when I was 9 and I walked into that room and I saw them in the Mormon temple garments or dress or clothing, I remember laughing because I thought they were in costume and I thought, what is all this? I'm 9 years old. Of course I'm going to laugh. They had a white he had a white suit on with this chef looking hat and she had this white dress on with the veil and they both had these green aprons on and I thought that was funny. So I laughed. So when this guy tells me you would look beautiful in a white gown and getting married in the temple, I'm like, nah, nope, I'm not wearing that. Again, I'm only 15, 16 now. And that's the only thought I had. It's not a normal wedding dress that you wear to the temple. It's not beautiful, but he didn't know that. He hadn't learned that part yet. So now he's got something in mind about if he joins the church and if he does everything they asked him to do, he could literally marry me in the temple and I'd be about 17 years old. He asked
And
my
your
parents' permission
father,
to court me.
yeah, your stepfather already likes him. He's
He
already
already
welcomed
likes him.
him. That
They
grooming
gave
piece
him
was
a
successful.
blessing. Yep, they gave him they said you can court her and with the expectation that he was going to join the church. So when he comes to ask me, this was our first date, I guess, outside of the home. So what's the thing a predator wants to do? Isolate. Yeah. So he comes and asks me to go out for a piece of pie and a cup of tea. Now my 16-year-old brain's like, what? He's 22. I'm just barely 16. And he's asking me out for a slice of pie and a cup of tea. And my brain doesn't focus on the pie. It's focusing on the tea. And the reason why is Mormons don't drink tea. So why is this
Caffeine.
guy asking me out for tea? So now my brain goes into crisis mode because my mom's standing right behind him with a big grin on her face. And I'm like, is this a trick question? There's a lot of abuse that goes on between my mom and I. So I'm always hyper vigilant about what's going to happen if I say yes, what's going to happen if I say no. I'm working through all the scenarios instantly to determine how am I going to answer this question with her standing right behind him and she's smiling. Why is she smiling? This is a trick question. If I say yes, I'm going to get in trouble because I'm not allowed to drink tea. So I have to say something else. I drink vodka. Nope, we can't say that. I'd be in really big trouble. So I'm like in a panic. And I have a 22-year-old man asking me on a date for pie and tea. And then my mind went, 16-year-olds don't go out for pie and tea. And so I'm like, dude, I listen to AC/DC. I don't drink tea or go out for pie or whatever. And I stormed out of the house and I slammed the door. So now I'm in a situation where I'm taking control of my own safety. And now I'm the one that has to bring in safety because I'm no longer safe with this guy in my house and my parents are not looking out for my safety. They're looking out for my eternal salvation and marrying me off to this guy, which my mom would love to have me married off and someone else take over the responsibility. So now I'm inviting friends over. So this guy keeps coming over. He's not done. He's still trying. So I start inviting my guy friends over from school, and I'm like, look, just come over and play pool,
Stay in my
and
house.
stay in
As
my
long as
house.
he's there,
This
stay in
guy's a
my
creep.
house.
I don't like him. There's something off with him. So these guys come over. We're all playing pool, and then two of the guys start getting into a fight over which one of them likes me more. And I'm like, I can't deal with this right now. It was so I had more problems than I could deal with. And eventually the Michael gave up, and he, guess what? Never joined the church. And so I asked my mom a couple years ago, I'm like, what was the deal with this guy? Why were you guys so bent on him? And why would you choose him for me to get married to at such a young age? Because I can't believe you're still mad about that. And I'm like, okay, I know a little bit more about gaslighting, and I'm starting to see new patterns. Still haven't got a name for it, but I'm starting to see new patterns because I've been doing a lot of my own work. I've discovered that the abduction wasn't a game. It wasn't her way of rescuing me from a dangerous situation. I was safer where I was than I was living with her. So there was a lot of trauma, violence. I was nearly killed by my stepsister, who wasn't, she is already often married by the time I'm a teenager. So she wasn't in the home. So I was still trying to figure out what all this meant. And then when she said, I didn't know this guy. He was your dad's friend. And then I started putting the pieces together that he came home, they were at the airport talking about aerodynamics. So I was able to piece together how it happened. And I remember seeing this guy at the airport. So, and he was always talking about washing and waxing the plane. So it just kind of all clicked together. And that's how I was able to figure out how he came into our lives. Where was his entry point? Because the entry points are the things you least expect. So documentation on how you meet new people. Some people write in a journal. It's all it is a journal entry. Met so and so today from such and such, came for dinner or whatever, just so that you have that piece documented. And then as new things happen with that person, you'll start to see a pattern. You go back and read through your journal, you'll start recognizing the patterns as they unfolded, and you documented it in an easy way. Now, not everybody writes in a journal, but a lot of people take notes on their phone. A quick, simple voice message. Today at such and such time, somebody struck me as odd that, just gave me a bad vibe. And this is what he looks like, or this is where I was. This is who she introduced me to, or whoever it was. It doesn't matter. What matters is that you're starting to document so that you can see patterns, because it's hard to see the patterns with a vague memory. You have to document it. You have to have something that you put in writing or put somewhere that you can reflect back to, so that you can start collecting what I call the evidence. It could be psychological evidence. It could just be notes like this of patterns and behaviors, but you can't collect evidence that you don't remember. So,
And I feel like that's actually one element of online cases and device assisted
mhm,
grooming that actually is doing a lot of the legwork for convictions, is that these
yeah.
these tools of ours
Evidence,
are
evidence,
evidence
evidence.
machines.
Even if you don't think it is, it is. And so that's why I think you always have your phone. There's a microphone on almost every single phone. Use the microphone. You don't ever have to listen to it again. But if something happens, it's there and you don't have to rely on your memory. And I wrote a book and just published earlier this year. And in fact, it's only the Kindle, the paperback's coming here really soon. I'm just wrapping up the workbooks that go with it. But the book is called Unsealing the Crime Scene, which is basically what I went through and how I was able to figure all this out, the processes that I went through, the gaps and the brick walls that I faced, and how did I overcome them? What did it take to get me from victim to thriver? And I don't say survivor because survivors are still looking over their shoulder. They're still surviving. And what I want is for people to use this book that's a roadmap to become a thriver and step away from just surviving. I don't want anybody to just survive. I want them to be able to look back at it and say, I see it now. And now go help someone else. Go prevent that from happening again, because my story is different than your story or someone else's story. And there's flags in all of our stories, and they're not going to be exactly the same. So by all of us sharing a little piece about the flags that we missed, and we can share these with other people, now all of a sudden we have some real tools that we can work with because we're bringing them forward. It's not easy sharing this. I'll say that it's taken me a long time to be able to talk about all of this without really re-triggering myself. However, it's still hard to make sure I'm not traumatizing someone else when I talk about it, because it can be triggering to talk about this. So I like to tell people that if you need a moment, to take a moment, and sometimes you have to pause something and come back to it later. Sometimes it might just be too much, but if it is, then make sure you have someone you can talk to, because that I didn't have. I could not talk about my trauma, so I carried it with me, and then I had that identity crisis until 2016 when I reunited with my biological father. And then a fire hose hit me, and now I'm overwhelmed with all these emotions that are unpacking themselves. I have no control over it. All these memories, all these feelings and stuff that I suppressed for so long, I didn't know what to do with all that. And I'm a strong person. I have a cybersecurity career. I'm an intelligent person, right? Like, why is this happening to me? And that's what it doesn't matter what you know. It doesn't matter how much you know. What matters is, how do you process it? And we can
That
go through
was that well, I'm just imagining how cathartic that was to and
you know,
to write.
the that is the most cathartic thing I've ever done in my entire life, was to write about all this. And I started raw with the first set of collaborative books that someone invited me to. And I'm like, "You want raw? I'll give you raw." And she's like, "I want raw." And I gave her raw. And I'm like, I look back at that book now going, "Oh my gosh, don't read that book." I mean, it's okay, but it's just, it was raw. It was definitely, but there was 8 books that I wrote in for that series, and it was all about emotions. The first one was anger, and I dumped a lot of anger into that book, and I felt better. And then she's like, "Do you want to do the next one?" I think it was on anxiety. I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, I want to do the next one." So I do another one. This is before AI, so this is like literally raw. Like, it was not reorganized, polished, or anything. It was just raw data. And
Human, very
yeah,
human.
definitely human. And I learned how to write through those books. I learned how to share my story. And in those first couple of books, it was probably sharing in a way that was real and people could appreciate it, but it was also it could be hard for some people to read it. So I didn't know about warnings or preparing somebody about what I'm about to share. It could be traumatizing for you. And if it's something that you lived through that's identical to mine, it could really, cause some pain to hear what I have to say. And then there's also just the empathetic side, where people feel the pain regardless if they've been through it or not. And I've shared my story with a coworker one time. She literally told me that she needs to go spend an hour staring at a wall because it was just too much. And that's when I started realizing the power of oversharing when somebody's not ready, and making sure that your audience is ready to hear about the trauma. Trauma is hard to listen to. That's why people tell people, just get over it, move on, shut up, don't talk about your story. Keep that to yourself. Don't air your laundry. People say that because it's too hard to hear. But now I'm here to tell you, don't tell me to shove my story back down inside. It has to come out. However, I need to learn how to share it in a way that they can appreciate it too.
Just how remarkable it is that you have taken what you lived through and used it to make tools to make other people safer is just incredible.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful for the work that you've put in to do the writing and the work that you continue to do to educate people about online safety, in-person safety, recognizing those warning flags, those red flags.
Mhm.
Is there something that you would like to leave with listeners and people who are watching us and who have followed this conversation? What is one thing that you'd really like them to remember or keep in mind?
For the listeners that are survivors of any form of child abuse, regardless if it's CSA or if it's child psychological abuse or physical abuse, whatever kind of trauma that you have endured in your childhood, be brave and know that it's not your fault that you experienced that. And when I say be brave, I mean share your story. You don't have to actually give it to somebody, but if you write it, that right there is so healing. Like you said, being cathartic. I learned so much about myself by writing it. And when I tell people now to write your story, I tell them just start writing until you have nothing left to say in the moment. And if you're writing about XYZ and all of a sudden elemental P comes through, write it. Put it right in where it was because something triggered that to come through. So write it. Go back to your XYZ once you finished writing whatever kind of inserted itself in the middle of that. And just keep writing. Don't question it. Just write it. And by time you're done for that particular moment, you'll know when to stop when your brain finally says, okay, that's all I really have to say about this today. You're not done, but you're done for the moment. You can put the pen down and you can walk away, but feel the pressure release from your shoulders, from your neck, from your body, the somatic feelings that you may have been carrying around. Where is that pressure being released? Where is your heart all of a sudden feeling lighter? Is it less of a tension headache or tension in your neck? Is it in your gut? Your toes all of a sudden feel tingly. What is it in your body that is speaking to you? Start listening to your body. Your body keeps the score. If you haven't read that book, it's a great book. And all this trauma is pinned up somewhere and your body has stored it. And so you can recognize where it's being held the most if you listen to those somatic signals. And being brave is sometimes looking in that mirror, and that could be in the form of writing and maybe reading what you wrote, looking in the mirror itself for real and telling yourself, this was never your fault. This was not something you did. This is something that was done to you. And now you have the power to figure out what that is, find the evidence, and then control the narrative. Become sovereign again. So be brave. And for those out there that have never experienced anything like this, I need you to be brave too, because it takes bravery to listen to my story. And if you can be brave enough to listen to my story without interrupting me, then we were both brave.
I love that. Dawn, where can people find you if they want to read your books, they want to get in touch with you? What is the best way for people to
Yeah.
get in touch with you?
Well, I do have sealedtomyabductor.com, which is where I'm writing the memoir right now. It's actually supposed to be the first book in the series. However, Unsealing the Crime Scene became the first book to be published, sort of, because it is only in Kindle right now. But
Hey, that's
when
published. My book, that's published.
when I looked at it, when you're approaching a crime scene. So let's get into true crime real quick. So when you're approaching a crime scene, what do you need? You need evidence. I can't tell you what happened unless I can see the evidence. So show me the evidence. What happened? When did it happen? How did it happen? What evidence here supports all of that? Because if you don't have anything that supports what happened, then you got to keep looking for some evidence, right? You
Or
got
you
to be
have
able to
no
find,
case.
yeah. So if I write the memoir without the evidence, then the second book becomes, oh, I needed this before I read that. And you don't really need it. I'm still going to be publishing the memoir on hopefully before September. But the only reason why I stepped up Unsealing the Crime Scene, where my mind is the crime scene because I suffered child psychological abuse and coercive control, my research partner is in Australia, and she's a clinical psychotherapist. She's also lived nearly the exact same story as mine, where she was abducted from her father as a young child, her and her siblings, and there was a lot of violence and trauma involved with her too. We have so many similarities in our lives, including the birthday. We both share the same birthday. It's like, wow, she's my doppelganger from down under. It's like my twin, my trauma twin.
Imagine the book tour.
I know, right? So she wrote a clinical treatment protocol, the Healing Qualia, and it's being published in July now. It was going to be end of May, and she wanted a chapter from my DARE protocols to be in her book. So I had to write a chapter for her book as a survivor, a voice of a survivor. And then I thought, well, if you're going to put that in your book and you're publishing your book in May, then I have to have something for someone to go say, I want to see more about that. Because if I don't finish this book, how is anybody going to be able to go from your book to my book? So I got the Kindle published just for that reason, just in case someone did go looking for it. So I had something out there. And now I got to finish the workbooks, because my book walks through how to you can't just sit down in a therapist's office and say, this is what happened. You have to understand, you have to have the words for it. You have to understand that actually something did happen to you, because a lot of us walk around not even realizing something actually happened to me that I can do something about, that's affecting me as a person, like the identity crisis. I needed to know that I was actually in an identity crisis. Like, I didn't know that until my therapist told me, you've got too many worlds going on that you cannot consolidate into one person. Like, you still think of yourself as this little 4-year-old girl, but you're also a mom and you're also cybersecurity and you found your dad and all these things are happening. And that's why I couldn't, it's not really consolidate, but you have to be able to
Integrate.
not really integrate. You have to be able to, what do you do? Like when you're closing out the bank till at the end of the day, all the numbers have to match. You have to line them up. And so when I was working on that, it was like, I would not know how to do that, except now that I went through it all and I started looking back, and I would tell other people, well, you have to start documenting things. You need to document everything, and you need to find documents. So, you have to go through this discovery phase is what I started calling it. It's like you got to, and I'm thinking in terms of crime scene and evidence management. So, and then I would think about, you've got all these memories. Now you need to start logging these memories. Now I'm in my cybersecurity mind. And so I started doing this and I started turning that lens on. I thought, this whole time I had the ability to figure it out. I just didn't put the lens on it. So when I started using the cybersecurity and the criminal justice lens on my own life, even though it was in the past, so I have my own cold case. So I'm solving my own cold case right now. And so as I documented the process that I went through and created the DARE framework. So DARE has an acronym. So you have to get through that discovery, documenting everything. You have to have the awareness. You have to be able to acknowledge all these facts and things that happen. It goes through the whole process, and there's 2 different DAREs. So you start with one that's internal. The second DARE is the external one. So you got to secure your human perimeter first. Sometimes it's not safe for you to go into your internal repair if you don't have a safe external perimeter. So sometimes you need to start there. You can start with either one. It doesn't matter which one you start with. So this book kind of lays all that out, but it's got to have the workbooks so that all the items that are in the book, I want someone to be able to write that out. So I'm creating the journal mostly. So it'd be easy for them to keep it. And what I want them to do with that book, which I wish I had, because the worst thing that's happened to me is I went to a therapist, I told her my whole story. She knew everything about it. Well, that we could at the time, because I didn't have all the right words to give her for her to go on, is when I moved. And now I have to look for another therapist. And guess what that means? It means I have to start all over again. And it is excruciating sometimes to have to start over and have them understand to the level that the other person did without interjecting sometimes. Like, if you're not responding to a question, am I really non-respondent? No, I'm not really not responding. I just don't have words. So now I'm in my trauma. So how do I get the therapist to understand that I'm still in a trauma form right here, so that we can continue, where we don't think, okay, that's a wrap, we're done, there's nothing else I can do, which is what happens to a lot of the people that are in my cohort, that we don't often we don't see the end of therapy, because we walk out of there still thinking, but I still feel like crap. Like there's still something wrong. There's still something off. And I still feel like I need help, but how am I getting that help? So that's what the Healing Qualia treatment protocol that she's writing is going to do. Is going to teach therapists how to work with people like me, and how to help me go through these phases of understanding the trauma. And then my DARE framework helps you as a person who may not be ready for therapy. You may not even think you need therapy, which is where I was. Mormons don't do therapy. You just need to pray harder. So,
Darn it, Dawn. That's the power of prayer.
right? So when my boss told me one day, after I found my dad and all the emotions, and like I'm crying at work all day long, I can't control my emotions, and I was raised to never show them. So to have someone like me who doesn't know how to express my emotions out of fear, it's not because I don't want to, but I'm afraid if I cry, I'd be seen as weak or whatever. So now all of a sudden I'm all emotions, and sometimes it's sad and crying, and then it's angry, and it was an emotional roller coaster. So she comes up to me and she's like, I think you need to talk to somebody. And I was like, you think I'm insane? That's how bad it was. I did not know I needed it. So anybody out there that may not realize that they could use therapy, this book is for them so that they can go through and decipher, discover all the little pieces of evidence, and the book will walk them through what to look for. Ask the questions without adding the emotions. So I try to help them take the emotion out of it and just ask the question, what does this piece of paper tell me? If you find a receipt, I have 3 storage units full of receipts that I inherited from my mom when she passed away last year, and I found all kinds of evidence, all kinds. So you have to go through this phase, and there's no time frame, there's no deadline, there's no expectation that you finish it all. You go through as much as you can, as long as you can. You can do it with a therapist working with you, or you can do it on your own and then go to a therapist. But the goal is that as they start writing their answers, what they've discovered, how they feel about it, what does this mean to them, and then they start writing their own narrative. They start saying, this is what I think happened, and that gives them the power. They're taking their little power back, and little by little that power becomes empowerment. And now they have a journal that they can go to a licensed therapist or a clinician and can say, I need help with this. And they can open the book and they can start on page 1. The therapist isn't overwhelmed because the therapist is going to learn as they're sharing, but now you have an active patient or client, someone that's participating actively, because now they have all the words. And now that therapist is equipped to help them work through that. And that's the bridge to the other treatment protocol. So now all of a sudden, what was missing was that gap, the bridge to seeking real therapy, and where a therapist can literally say, okay, I know what to do here. This I'm trained for.
It's
So
incredible.
that's kind of where I'm at. So where to find me? So sealedtomyabductor.com. And then I'm all over social media, Dawn McCarty. If you just type that in, it'll come up. It's different names, but you'll see I have the same photo on across all my social media. Where else am I? Driver Speak is my speaking platform for Nothing About Us Without Us, which is where we have survivor only led conferences. We've had collaborative books, all kinds of things going on there. Hopefully I'll be going to Perth, Australia this year to speak about the mind is the crime scene. We can start saying, just because it was psychological abuse doesn't mean it wasn't abuse. And if you will press charges on child abuse, then maybe we need to start seeing charges on evidence of psychological abuse, because it changed my entire life. Now, I was still successful. I was still able to raise my children. I was still able to gain a career in cybersecurity and criminal, and I have 4 degrees. On paper, I look great. Just I need a little help on the inside. I needed to normalize mental health. I needed to say it's okay. And so that's what I'm going to be taking out on the road and sharing the why. And I'm big about why. You have to understand why. And this is why, because I am the person I need to be right now. Not who I was supposed to be, not who I was meant to be. I am the person I am right now. because of all the things that have happened to me. And it all is empowerment because I control it now. I control the narrative. I get to say what I think and what I don't think anymore. I don't have to live on someone else's identity. It's all me. And that's why we need to get more people out there speaking about it. And that's why we have the platform.
I know I speak for everybody listening when I extend my gratitude for your willingness to tell your story, to do the work that you're doing to help protect families and children across the world. And I wish you the best of luck with all of your writing and endeavors. And I'm so glad that you were able to join us today on Known and Trusted and get this message even further out into the world. So thank you very much for being here.
Well, thank you for allowing me your space to share more about my story and share it with others that may be listening who were like me and didn't know that they needed something. Just need a little hint. I appreciate you.